A good horror game is something special. It is not able just to challenge us with its gameplay or tell a good story, but to scare us, to haunt our dreams and idle thoughts, even to make us question our own perceptions of reality. In this podcast, we meet the developers of both existing popular horror titles and hotly anticipated upcoming games to discuss how they do it, what inspires them, and all things spooky and unnerving. Welcome to Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards.
Hello and welcome to Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. As ever, your hosts Phil and Will, and today we are joined by Jordan, who is the creative mind behind an upcoming game called Conscript, which is set in the trenches of World War One and looks very promising and intriguing. You've just come back from showing it off at was it PAX Australia?
Yeah. PAX Australia was a few days ago. Still recovering because PAX is exhausting. It's one of those things where it's very rewarding, of course, but it's hard to describe to people who haven't showcased how exhausting it is to stand there for 3 days. It feels like your knees are about to buckle in because you're just standing around for 3 days straight and talking to people for like 10 hours a day. But it's still, like I said, it's very rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you don't get the opportunity to kind of decide like a normal con goer just to go, oh well, I don't feel like talking to anyone right now. I'll take a break from it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, so there were three of us at the booth, including me, and we were lucky to have like a 20-minute lunch break each because just the amount of people that were coming to the booth, which is a good problem to have. It was drawing quite a lot of attention, but yeah, I wouldn't know what it's like to experience PAX as a normal consumer because I'm always on the other end of it. But it's like super rewarding because when you're working like in a bubble for so long, like I've just been working in this room for so long in a bubble, you kind of you forget that what you're working on is actually pretty cool and that it's you just totally forget that you're working on something that's actually interesting. And so when you do these conventions, it's kind of a good reminder that like, hang on, it's actually pretty cool. So yeah, bit of a
Yeah.
morale boost.
People are actually
I can imagine.
people are actually
Yeah.
interested in my product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so Conscript take a lot of inspiration from kind of classic survival horror and that sort of thing. So is that kind of where you got into the horror genre, like from the old school like classic games or movies involved or films and stuff as well?
Yeah, my God, let me think back to my childhood. Um, my first experience with survival horror was the Resident Evil remake. I remember my grandparents had exchange students, I think from Korea, and one of them, this is when I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and one of them was playing remake, and I was like so terrified. I remember having nightmares that night, not being able to sleep, thinking there's zombies in my house. But it wasn't until like a few years later that Resident Evil 4 was actually my first sort of. That was the first survival horror. I guess that's a whole other debate if that's a survival horror game, but that was my first Resident Evil game that I owned, and just kind of fell in love with the series then, and then played through them all. I was at an age at that point where I wasn't like, I was able to get through them without shitting in my pants. So yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it. It's always been a genre that I've just really, really loved. So much so that I've decided to devote 7 years of my life to making one. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So are you into other horror as well, in terms of like TV and film and stuff, or is it mainly just the games that?
Honestly, mainly, I don't really watch too many movies in general, to be honest. And if I do, they're probably like historical movies, historical war movies. But yeah, horror movies don't really interest me too much. But I just love the survival horror genre, and more so from a gameplay perspective, uh, rather than a thematic perspective, if that makes sense. Like I don't really care
Mm.
for horror too much. That's a bad thing to say as a developer, but it's it's more of a it's more of the actual gameplay that I enjoy, if that makes
Mm.
sense. It's kind of like the very purposeful design of those old school horror games. That's what always has drawn me in, and the stories and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a good sign because there's a lot of kind of people very eager to call anything survival horror if you
right,
can
right,
shoot a gun. Whereas I think
yeah,
certainly people who are kind of more attentive to what the gameplay is, it's always it sounds like, oh, this will be interesting what they're producing then.
yeah, totally. Because it's like it is one of those. I guess that's a debate that I always see on Twitter. Is like, what is survival horror? But to me, it's those classic gameplay mechanics, like from those old Resident Evil games and those old Silent Hill games. Um, and yeah, that's what I've tried to do with Conscript. So hopefully I did a good job.
Yeah. No, yeah, we definitely can't wait to get our hands hot on it. So what do you believe makes a good survival horror game then?
Hmm.
What
Yeah, that is like one of those questions, and I'm sure you guys, just being in like the survival horror community, like that's always just a debate that's going
mm.
around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to me, let me think. Um, my if I can look at, like, how do I put this? If I could choose one game to represent those mechanics in its purest form, it would be
Mm.
Resident Evil Remake or Resident Evil 2. That's like the gold standard for me in terms of the level design, where it's not really Metroidvania, but it's like pseudo Metroidvania. Instead of abilities, you're kind of getting keys and you're solving puzzles, and
Mm.
level design that promotes backtracking, has you double back on yourself quite a few times in interesting ways. Puzzles, of course. Combat is not the focus, but combat should ultimately be deterred, or should be what's the word? It shouldn't be encouraged. Whatever the whatever the opposite of
Yeah.
encouraged is, discouraged. It's early in the morning. My
Yeah.
brain's still turning on. Um, yeah, combat shouldn't be encouraged. It should always, if you're going to engage in combat, it should always come at like a great cost to inventory management, which is kind of another mechanic that ties into it all, is inventory management. And I'd say those are kind of the core pillars. But of course, depends on who you ask. Some people probably, yeah, it depends who you ask. That's the debate, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah. I know, definitely. It's a lot more raw in that way, isn't it? Because I think in normal real life, I think that's the only way normal people would fight against something, is literally if it's life or death.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
so it's very ingrained in us, I think.
yeah,
So
totally.
our Resident Evil remake is my gold standard as well. So
Yeah,
very good
yeah,
taste.
yeah. No, definitely. I think that game definitely manages that balance between all those
Mm,
pillars the most cohesively, and Resident Evil 2 does as well, and the Resident Evil 2 remake, in
yeah.
my opinion. Those are like the gold standards for sure.
Yeah, absolutely no disagreements here on that front. I don't think.
But you know what? It's interesting because I was thinking the other day. Then you look at a game like Silent Hill 2, and Silent Hill 2 is definitely a survival horror game. I don't think anyone would disagree that it's a survival horror game, but it doesn't really
Mm,
share many of those pillars when you think about it. The level design is there are some kind of there is quite a lot of level design that encourages backtracking, but there's no real ammo conservation or inventory management. I wouldn't say combat is really discouraged because there's so much ammo in that game that it doesn't really come at a cost. So then you have
no.
cases like that where that kind of just destroys my whole theory from before. But yeah, that's one of those things.
Yeah. So where would you say Conscript falls on that line then?
Conscript is very much, I would say it's a mix between so many things. Oh my god. It's very close. Level design is very close to those old school Resident Evils in terms of having kind of a central room and east and west wings that you kind of go back and forth between. But man, it also shares a lot of level design with Silent Hill as well in some of the later chapters that I won't get into because that's spoilers. But it shares so many things from so many different games. There's a merchant from Resident Evil 4 where you can trade currency to upgrade weapons as well, and which was a hard. Some mechanics like that are very hard to balance with that gameplay because, like I said, you don't want to encourage combat. But then I also kind of came across a thematic dilemma, which was that the game takes place during a war and during an active battle where combat is sort of expected as well. So that was a super tough balance. And but yeah, it's somewhere between Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil with elements of Resident Evil 4, I would say.
Just for obviously anyone who's watching this who might not be familiar, do you want to kind of give a bit of a background in terms of what the game's about? So obviously we've
Yeah,
mentioned
sure.
it's from World War One, but kind of I don't know if you want to go into more detail
Sure.
about.
Yeah, Conscript is a World War One, themed survival horror game. It takes place during the Battle of Verdun in 1916, and basically you play as a French soldier whose brother goes missing, and you have to find him. And because it's a survival horror game, things go bad, because otherwise there'd be no game. And you're kind of you're forced to survive in like an active battle, and yeah, that's my elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was when I played. I forget when it was. I think it was last year. Played the demo and
Cool.
very very tough. And also like saying that as a positive, like extremely tough for kind of playing through it. But also like I was very intrigued to see survival horror where the enemy wasn't like zombies and monsters from the Umbrella Corporation or some sort of weird other dimension things. It was just war. War was the
Yeah.
horror thing. Like and you like captured that really well as well. Like there's a lot of kind of even in that short segments like very harrowing moments and um genuinely like I think I never recorded my gameplay at the time or whatever, but yeah, there's a few moments where if I had, you'd have seen me like jumping, especially when like the soldiers are coming in and like shouting and like German and other stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
German.
yeah, that wasn't why I do. It just I think yeah, you get immersed in that moment and like everything kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
feels really intense and like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that it comes across because that was sort of it's been, I wouldn't say a point of contention. Not many people have complained, but it's just something that I've read, and because I'm a developer, I'm predisposed to just focus on the negative things. But there's just been like a few comments about how it's not survival horror because there's no monsters, and I'm like, nah, I disagree with that. I don't think survival
Yeah.
horror needs some zombie to be classified as survival. I think like I said, survival horror is a gameplay. It's a definition. It's a way to define gameplay. It's not. It shouldn't matter if there's zombies or ghosts or whatever. And yeah, like with Conscript, it's a game based on history, and the whole point of the game is to illustrate how horrific the history was. So if I was to make up things, I feel personally that it would kind of do a disservice to the whole point of having the World War One theme. And it's not to say like I know that there are games that do that, and they're totally valid interpretations of survival horror as well. But for me personally, I just wanted to keep things grounded because when you really research the history, it's pretty horrific enough as it is.
Yeah, I mean you can definitely have that horror without having to invent monsters because we've got our own monsters in the real world.
Yep.
It's like one of the best horror films like I've ever seen is Green Room, which is stars. It's like basically a band who go to a gig and they don't know what they're getting in for, and it turns out it's like this neo-Nazi club, and then they end up locked in, and Patrick Stewart plays the leader, and it's just like this really closed off thing, but and it's really intense. No slashes or boogeymen or anything, but it's fantastic as a horror, and it's just
Cool.
people.
Yeah, exactly. That is to me always been like way scarier than something fictional. Yeah, totally agree.
So obviously we know that the game's based during World War One. Is there a particular reason or inspiration that you got for it to be set in World War One?
Well, back when I started, I always knew that I wanted to do a horror-based history game, but I was struggling to, because I have a history degree, so I've always kind of loved history
Okay.
and kind of understood how horrific it is, and so I always knew I wanted to do some kind of history-based horror, survival horror game. But yeah, it took me a while to kind of settle on the setting. And originally, I was gonna like have this thing where you would time travel through different historical periods, but that's obviously way too much for like my first game. So I remember listening to Dan Carlin, the historian. He's basically
Not off the top of my head now.
he's a famous historian who does like a really he's known a lot for his podcast series, where he just goes down different historical events and like does it in a really gripping way. And I was listening to his World War One series at the time, and he would illustrate a lot of the horrors of the war. And then I just kind of went down this rabbit hole and started researching World War One, and kind of became a little bit, obsessed and fascinated with it. And it just seemed natural and it also helped that not many games do it. And at that time, there weren't any horror games doing it. Amnesia beat me to it, which I'm annoyed about. But at that time, when I first started, there was not really any World War One survival horror games. So I was like, yeah, this just feels right. And I kind of haven't even looked back since. It just all felt right since then, because a lot of games, default to World War Two, or they just basically just default to World War Two or a modern setting. And being an indie developer as well, you do have to kind of stand out in some ways. You do have to have that elevator pitch, and having that World War One setting, I feel, has really helped with that.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing you can say, I mean, as much as the Bunker is a great game, it is obviously based around a monster that's chasing you rather than soldiers. So there is some distance between the two.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't. I played Amnesia for about 10 minutes because I felt like I had to, because it was a World War One game, and then I stopped myself, not because I wasn't enjoying it, because it seemed really cool, but I felt that I had to stop because, how do I put this? I didn't want to be like influenced by it. I wanted any coincidences between the games, because there will be some, because they take place in the same setting, and you play as a French soldier in both of them. I wanted any coincidences to just be like coincidences and not, you know what I mean? I didn't want it to like alter my, like if there was a similarity in Conscript, I didn't want to then second guess it because Amnesia did it. So I just stopped playing. So
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. And then you obviously know the choices that you've made making the game are your choices, not
exactly.
pulled from
Yeah.
So, like, I mentioned before about like when playing the game and like you've got that kind of battlefield situation when you go through the trenches and there's like the cannon standing off and stuff. How tough was this? Was it tough to do the sound design on that and make it sound? Because there's a hell of a lot going on all at once. It seems like even when you're like in quite a quiet area, there's all the background noises and.
Yeah, sound design is one of those things that's. I mean, it's hard. Like every aspect of game development, it's hard. And because I had no game development experience before this game, so I've had to like teach myself on the job. That was like, I did want it to intentionally be overwhelming in a lot of spots in the game, because when you read the historical accounts, it's just like a lot of soldiers would talk about how like the rumbling and the shelling just literally never stopped. Like that was just their background. That was their white noise was just shelling in the background and like earthquake type sound. So I wanted to kind of keep that consistent throughout the game because that's what it would have been like. But yeah, sound design, it's one of those things that it's so important for a horror game. But it's tricky. It's tricky. I'm just trying to think, like a lot of my tricks with sound design probably pretty basic in terms of how I make the sounds. Like if it's a gunshot sound and I want to make it sound satisfying, I'll literally just overlay like 3 gunshot sounds on each other and to make everything seem chunky. And that's kind of that's been my design philosophy. Is like if I need to create a sound, just like overlap a bunch of sounds together, because it gives it that kind of chunky feel, and just add a lot of bass to everything.
Yeah.
No,
Um,
I can imagine it's been quite challenging, obviously, having to learn every aspect of game development, seeing as it's just yourself. It must have been quite tough, but quite rewarding as well.
Yeah, oh man, it's been a whole education, this project, and I've made like every mistake in the book so far, and I probably still will until it's released. But yeah, it's been overwhelming at times, but yeah, the amount of skills that I've learned, even things that are kind of less tangible, like marketing or community management and things like that, I've had to learn as well. So there's just so much that goes into game development, and I know everyone says that, but I've had to live it firsthand because I've literally done everything so far until I signed with the publisher. But yeah.
Just on the sound front, did that include like the music and stuff? Where does that kind of fit in? Because I mean, it's been a while since I played the demo, so forgive me. I can't remember kind of exactly what it was like in terms of the music there. But
Yes. So that is one thing that I'm not doing is the soundtrack. So I got a good friend doing the soundtrack, Sunny. So there is like a soundtrack, similar to like the old Resident Evil games where you got the save room music and combat music and all that kind of stuff. And then so there is a soundtrack. Was that your question?
it was more about like kind of, is that something you had to kind of pick up and do yourself, or if you've got someone doing that for you?
That's off my. I tried to do it, and I was like, this is just not my. Because you have to, at a certain point, you have to start, if you can, you have to start outsourcing things that you're not good at, because there's only 24 hours in the day, and otherwise I don't want to be working on this for 10 years. Like I need to hand off the things that I don't enjoy or I'm not as good at to other people. It's just more efficient. But yeah, so the soundtrack is being done by my friend Sunny, and although a lot of the ambient tracks in the game are me, in terms of like not the score but the weird ambient Silent Hill-ish sort of weird music that I can't even describe it. Like it's like when you, like in Silent Hill, when you go into a room and there's just a weird sound,
Like an eerie background.
sound. Yeah, so I've done some of them, but the majority of the music and the score is not done by me.
Yeah, I mean that is fair. I suppose teaching yourself everything you need to know to like making a game in its entirety, and then teaching yourself to compose music for it would probably be a little bit too much.
Yeah. Yeah, if there were 48 hours in the day, I could probably do it, but days are too short. So
yeah. So what was the biggest kind of the challenge as far as that goes? Then the toughest thing you've had to come up against?
oh man, everything's been challenging. It's hard to pinpoint one. I mean, for me personally, like learning how to code and do all that part of game development, that's been the most challenging for me, just because it's not what I'm naturally inclined to do. Like for me, that stuff is just kind of a means to an end to create the game, if that makes sense. Like it's not something that I really enjoy. It's just, but I've found enjoyment in it because
Yeah.
when you do it, your game gets created, which gives me enjoyment. But I'm not like a computer science kind of guy. I've probably always been more artistically inclined, and learning all that stuff is just a means to an end to create what I want to create. But if I'm lucky enough to ever expand, that is the first thing that I'm taking off my plate is coding and the engineering side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who does the coding side of it, I can very much relate to why you'd want to do that.
Yep, totally.
Well,
Yeah. And then to flip that question on its head a little bit, what's been the most fun thing that you've done during the development?
Yeah, just anything that's anything that directly involves like creating stuff and like the artistic side of things. I love level design. I love like researching, going through the process of researching whatever part of history the level's based on, and then trying to like create level design that flows while also keeping that history in mind. Which is it kind of gives me constraints as well. I can't go too crazy. I have to kind of always be respectful to the source material.
Yeah.
So that's been a very enjoyable part of it, is the level design and creating the environments, like the environment design, and adding the sound design on top of that. I like creating. It sounds like obvious because I'm a game developer, but when it comes to actually creating like that virtual space, that's where I feel kind of most like I'm in flow and like I'm working the best I can, when I'm not bogged down by like all the other kind of bullshit that comes along with it. When I'm actually creating, that's when I feel the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you were kind of like able to go, right, I'll get a whole team and have them do like sort of different things. Your main thing, you'd like to be on the levels and that sort of side of thing, in terms of the layouts, or in terms of like making them like look the way they do, or both?
Both. Yeah. I really like the kind of the science, I guess, behind level design, and especially with the Resident Evil type of flow where it's having levels, double back on each other, and you're kind of passing through rooms and backtracking, and it's like that Dark Souls sort of approach where you open a door and you're like, this is where I am. I really enjoy that, designing levels like that as well. But if it was my way and I was to expand, I would ideally just be like a Kojima type character that just comes in and this is my vision, create it.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario. Yeah.
You get to make all your
Yeah.
levels out of Lego then. Like I think that's how he does his initial
really?
design process, is like puts it all together physically as Lego blocks and then goes, well, I don't know how much he's involved, but presumably like, make this level.
Yeah. That's the dream. That's the dream right there.
Yeah. You've mentioned obviously with all about the history of World War One and stuff. Is there any particular recounts and stories that have potentially be in the game, or is it inspired from?
Yeah, I mean it's inspired by so many different things, so many different kind of historical documents and books. I've always loved the book Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger. A lot of different, even poems as well. I've been inspired by a lot of different poems that were written. Like I Have a Rendezvous with Death by Alan Seeger is one that I've always kind of gravitated towards, and that's kind of inspired the themes of the game, I suppose. What else? Even movies. I love. 1917 was a good World War One movie. All the versions of All Quiet on the Western Front. I know a lot of history people kind of hated the new one, but I thought it was, even if it wasn't, a one for one remake of the book, I thought it still had a lot of. I still thought it was great. So, yeah, I'm inspired by so many different things. Yeah. That's a vague answer, but
Yeah. Is there a reason why it's specifically a French soldier that we play as rather than kind of any of the other allies and that side of things?
Yeah, so the whole story behind that is originally it was actually going to be either an English or an Australian, because I am Australian. And if you actually look far back enough on my Twitter feed, you probably can still find videos where the main character was, had that green khaki camouflage uniform that the English had. So the reason that there's a few reasons why I changed it to be a French soldier. One of them is kind of an obvious, more of a gameplay reason, which was the uniforms were bright blue, and when the game's like so heavily pixelated and kind of low resolution, having that main character be blue is actually like good. It's good visually because
Mm.
the game's so low resolution and everything's brown and dark and muddy in the game. Having that bright blue uniform stick out in the center of the screen is kind of good game design because all of the enemies, have those dark, German kind of gray uniforms. So if the main character was to be like a dark greeny gray and the enemies were all the same color, it would just be too confusing. So having that bright blue uniform stick out made sense from a gameplay perspective. That was one reason. Another reason was just that the Battle of Verdun, I found for me, was going to work better as a setting because it allowed me to have more environment variety. Because if you look at battles like Passchendaele and the Somme, it was pretty much just it was just mud. Whereas Verdun kind of allowed me to have that muddy trench atmosphere, but it also allowed me to have things like forts. There are a lot of different forts in Verdun, like 18th century forts that were fought over, and villages, and it just allowed me to have a bit more environment variety because I didn't want the game to just take place in a trench. I wanted kind of each chapter of the game to be kind of a new environment. So yeah, those are the two main reasons. Yeah, those are the two main reasons.
Yep, fair enough. Because I think that was probably one of the things when it kind of saw it and it was like French soul. I mean, obviously intriguing in itself, and then it was like of you being Australian, it was like, oh, I wonder. Like, I was wondering
Yeah,
if there was like
yeah, I'm not
ancestry
French.
or something.
I have no
No.
French ancestry. Yeah, yeah. A lot of people ask me why not an Australian soldier. Maybe DLC. We'll see. If you all buy the game and it's successful enough, then I'll do an Australian DLC. Oh god, that's not a promise. People are going to expect that now.
Yep, it's out there now. So
No, but we'll start to drive, right? We need everyone
Yeah.
playing this and buying this so we can get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So you've had, I mean, you mentioned obviously we talked about packs earlier and stuff, but there's been quite a lot of support as far as like building the community for for the game and everything. I'm presuming from your perspective that's been really good to see, and that especially kind of one of the many skills you're teaching yourself was marketing as you were kind of growing with it and stuff and getting all that back. So what's that been like that as an experience, like getting all that kind of support and feedback and stuff?
Oh, it's been great. It's like many things, it has been hard though, and it's been a bit of a slog because I started marketing very early because I kind of knew that would be probably one of my biggest battles, especially because the game, I mean, it is niche. Survival horror is quite a bit bigger now with the recent resurgence, but back when I started, like 2017, 18, it was still at that kind of weird point where survival horror was a bit like it was coming after the dark days of Resident Evil, where Resident Evil wasn't really survival horror and there was no real like AAA demand for it. So I knew that I was doing something a bit risky and it was a niche genre, so I kind of had to focus on marketing quite early. So I started posting, super early in development, and it's just one of those things where it's kind of a necessary evil. You have to do it because I'm not going to spend 7 years on something and then no one buys it.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And if in a hypothetical world I didn't have to do that, the game would probably be out now because it's just took up so much of my time. But it's worth that time investment because, well, I want to get paid. So, but
Yeah.
no, it's been great. It's been great, but yeah, it's been hard just because you have to constantly keep on top of things. A lot of different events, taking part in a lot of different events, Steam events, making trailers for different things. That all is a massive time sink, but it pays off. It pays off. Having that kind of social, building that community, it's kind of like a snowball effect to a lot of other different things. Like good publishing deals, government grants. It's necessary if you want to kind of level up, I suppose, and if you want to have success. Just to put it bluntly, if you want to have success, you're gonna have to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it has been, I think, really good to see just how much people do kind of support and that. And the games, obviously, you've got a following on Twitter, which is fairly sizable as far as that. And then, well, if you basically didn't get any chance to get away from the stall, then obviously people are clamoring for it in person as well.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things as well where you just don't, because like I said, it is such, on paper, it is such a niche thing. A World War One, so those are two like niche things, but in hindsight, it's been like a benefit to have that kind of hyper niche thing, because the people that come are like fanatics, and I would rather have that maybe smaller but fanatical fan base than some kind of broad, trying to chase whatever the latest trend is, try to make like a Fortnite clone or something. I don't know.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it might be difficult in that setting, I think, as well, to have that kind of Fortnite style multiplayer with the emotes and the dances and stuff.
That's Conscript 2 emotes, and I'll have loot boxes too.
But I mean, yeah, it's all paid off. Obviously, you've fairly recently signed with Team 17 to publish the game. So, where do things stand now in terms of like what's next on the horizon?
Well, for me, I'm at a stage of development where I'm just super close to having it finished. So for me, it's just like head down. Team 17 will take care of all the marketing and all the stuff that I, don't want to do. That's their job now. For me, my focus is literally head down, get this thing finished, and so we can have it out next year sometime. And yeah, I'm super close to getting it finished. So yeah, good times. Finally, after 7 years.
No, I bet you're quite excited for that now. Then
Yeah, totally. I don't even
getting out there.
I don't even know how to. It's a whole different conversation, but like when it's finally finished, I don't know what I want to do with myself.
No. But no, it's from quite a lot of the developers we've spoken to, they've mentioned about playing the backlog of games that they've built up over the years of development and such. So I'm guessing over 7 years you've built quite a backlog that you'd like to play.
Man, I Jesus Christ, where do I start? There's so many even games from like friends that developer friends who have released their games, and I haven't even. It's like, sorry, man, I haven't even had a chance to play it. I've been working like 10, 12-hour days, and man, yeah, it's a big backlog, big backlog. I think the only games that I'll really stop and play is like Resident Evil 4 remake, of course. That's pretty much it though for the past year. I played the Dead Space remake as well. If there's like a massive survival horror game, I'll try and play it if I have time. But other than that, yeah, it's been pretty. And not only that, but this is kind of depressing. But when you're a developer, playing games loses its enjoyment. Unfortunately, that's been my experience anyway. It's like, yeah, when you spend all day kind of working on them, it's hard to find the motivation to actually play them. And then when you play them, it's hard not to just start analyzing everything and like not seeing it as a piece of entertainment. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like how have they done that and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just like find a way to kind of switch something off and like be like, nope, I'm not a game developer while I'm playing this. Just
yeah. Well, hopefully once it's finished, I'll be able to do that, because I have not been able to do that while it's in development. But yeah, that'll be my goal, to actually enjoy a game after it's finished.
well, hopefully, I mean, we've got the Horror Game Awards come up in December now. Hopefully, we'll have a good selection of possible recommendations for the future. So once you can kind of
Definitely.
kick back and relax and go, right, okay, what's been out? Because I think this year, I mean, I don't know whether I'm just kind of imagining it because we've been more focused on doing the awards and stuff, but it does feel like there's more horror games than ever, like out at the moment. So like quite a few new games and demos released for like survival horror stuff, and in particular, but also kind of wider horror genres. So it does
Yeah,
feel like we're in
totally.
a kind of I don't want to say golden age. That sounds too corny, but some sort of resurgence.
I would agree. I would agree because I think it's one of those rare times where both the AAA and the indie scene are like really booming because for a long time it was kind of the indie scene carrying things while AAA was doing whatever, making like
Yeah.
Resident Evil 6 and stuff like that. Yeah, for a while there, AAA kind of didn't see the value in survival horror, and now they do. And on top of that, I think you're seeing a lot of those indie games come out now that started working on their games during that kind of lull, that AAA lull, because I think a lot of developers were like, well, if AAA is not going to do it, I'll do it. And now you're kind of seeing a lot of those games
Yeah.
come out, but at the same time, AAA's kind of got their shit together as well. So I would agree that it's definitely a golden age.
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID's got a bit of a play to that as well,
Yeah, of
hasn't it?
course.
With the amount of time everyone's had in lockdown, literally,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
they've had all the time to do it. So
yeah, totally.
I think that's what we're seeing that resurgence with now. Because I think just looking at even the Steam Next Fest that's going on at the moment, there was 196 horror games.
Oh man, that's
So
like scary for me. It's like all I see is like competition there. That's another downside of being a developer is like everything turns into. Yeah, anyway,
yeah,
you get what I'm saying.
yeah, oh no, definitely, and that's the kind of thing that we wanted to do with the Horror Game Awards, was that give everyone like an equal playing field, no matter how many games there are out there, like, or how big the studios are, like from studios from yourself and to the AAA, it's all free for everyone. So
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and I think we can get to say that like it's definitely not guaranteed that AAA automatically means it'll be the best out of the stuff as well. Because I mean, we've seen some great stuff this year with the RE4 remake in Dead Space, and then we've got as we're recording this, we're a week away from Alan Wake 2 coming out and things like that. But then on the other hand, like with games like Signalis that came out last year, games like your game, some of like the demos that we like in Steam Next Fest, like easily kind of hark back to like those older games and like that way, because it's not just about big shiny graphics. It's like
right,
actually doing the thing with the level design and the gameplay and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna find a lot more risks in the indie space than you ever will in AAA. So yeah, a lot more creativity and risks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything you've not had the chance to play that you've got your eye on and thinking, oh, that'd be?
Man, the first one that comes to mind is Signalis. That's one that I've also wanted to really get to. Yeah, I started playing like the first 10 minutes. That was another one where actually I didn't want to be inspired by it because I knew I played the first like 20 minutes and I'm like, this is so good that this is going to influence me. So I stopped. And that's definitely one that after I finish Conscript, I want to play through completely because I know that's kind of just won so many awards and it's had so much success. Dredge, of course, is another one, published by Team 17.
Yeah.
I haven't even had a chance to play Dredge yet. There's so many, and I feel bad because I know all the developers and like I'm really friendly with them, but I haven't even had a chance to play their game. So,
yeah, I mean, from the sounds of it, like especially from the conversations we've had with developers, it does sound like the main like developer like swapping pleasantries and like talking about each other's games and just go, but I'm never going to be able to play it because I never get a chance to play games.
I'll play it in like 2027, but I'm happy for your success, but I'll get to play it in like 2027. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes up. But obviously, hoping from your perspective in Conscript, we are very much, I think, looking forward to once you're able to do them, have that kind of moment, and you say, right, we've got a release date and we're doing the thing. That presumably will be a huge relief.
Yeah, that's going to be a relief, but it's also going to be terrifying. Just having that date, yeah, that's going to be very anxiety-inducing. But it's time, it's time to get this thing kind of wrapped up, because it's not that I mean, I could work on this for 20 more years because I'm just crazy, but it's just time. It's time to move on. It's time to kind of go to the next chapter of my life and see what's next, because this has been in the making, yeah, for 6-7 years now, pretty much from my entire 20s. So I need the next chapter.
Yeah.
So it's obviously coming out on Steam. Are you planning on releasing for consoles as well, or just for
Yeah,
Steam
so
as things stand?
yeah, right. I mean, right now Steam's the only platform that's announced, but obviously it kind of goes without saying that every platform is best for all parties, including myself. Obviously, that's the dream. And yeah, we're going to try and make it happen, of course. But it's just the problem with consoles is that there's so many extra bureaucratic. There's just so many extra steps. Steam is a super easy platform to deal with, whereas consoles, is a bit harder. That's Team 17's job, and I'm sure they'll do a great job at that. But yeah, I'm not doing the console porting myself, so that's going to be up to them. But like I said, it's in everyone's interest that console ports happen. So
Yeah.
Cool. And in the meantime, obviously, people want to support your game. Then the best thing they can do is go and give you a wish list.
yeah, you guessed it. You've probably heard that 50 times from other developers already. But yeah, that is definitely the best way. So yeah, wish list on Steam if you haven't already. And yeah, there's a demo up, so you can check it out. Check the demo out, and then wish list it if you enjoy it.
Yep. And that will be all linked down in the description of the video for those who are watching. So hopefully check that out and give it a wish list, and do play the demo as well. It's very, very good, and it will give you some mild form of gamer shell shock, I think.
That's the medical term, gamer shell shock.
Yeah, no, it's I've got to say, like, I've done playing demos like whenever I can, but like that's one of the ones that has stuck with me for a long time, which is why I was
Awesome.
obviously really keen to speak to you today, and really keen to see when the game comes out, because once played that, it was like, yeah, this is something special.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So that's going to be the end of this episode, I think. So thank you very much, Jordan, once again. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you to everyone who's watched, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Right.
Cheers.
This has been Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. Thank you very much for listening. Check out the links in the description for more info on where to follow our guests in order to support them and keep up to date with their work. The Horror Game Awards will be airing live on YouTube on Saturday the 16th of December. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel to avoid missing out on what promises to be a very exciting night of awards and game reveals, as well as future episodes of this podcast and other content. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.